On the Tylt, we have a ton of different debate questions that all relate to diet, exercise, nutrition. We've asked things like, is calorie counting helpful or hurtful? Is going vegan actually healthier for you? Is intermittent fasting legit? Is keto legit? Is bulletproof coffee weird? All of these things that all kind of get at what is this relationship that we have with food. So we wanted to go to one of the many experts out there who know about nutrition and who know what a relationship with food is and what a healthy one actually looks like. So we decided to sit down with Whitney Catalano, who is a registered dietitian based in LA. So when I say we sat down with her, I really mean our producer Ashley sat down with her in Ashley's home in Los Angeles with her 2 dogs. Whitney focuses on something very specific within the diet world called intuitive eating.
So I'm a registered dietitian. I help people stop dieting, heal their relationship with food, their bodies. And so intuitive eating takes you through this process of normalizing your relationship with food again, just figuring out how to eat for your body, listen to your hunger and fullness signals, eat for your values. So it goes hand in hand with things like eating for a disease or eating veganism if that's your value system, so it accommodates any style of eating as long as you remove the pursuit of weight loss.
So I had a lot of questions for Whitney after she first described what intuitive eating is, because I remember the very first time someone described to me that you ought to have a relationship with food, something that's reciprocal. That was very transformational for me because I had always thought of food as this very transactional thing, something that gave my body fuel, but something that I didn't fully understand and didn't really want to understand. It was almost kind of this scary thing in my life. But once I started to think about food as a relationship, something that has gives and takes on both ends, food really began to change.
With food, it's such an integral part of nourishing our bodies. And I mean, we have to do it multiple times a day. It's super necessary. So, having a relationship with food, I think a lot of people aren't conscious of what the pursuit of weight loss or this obsession with health, especially in LA, and I'm sure even in New York, there's just such an intense obsession with health to the point that you start to wonder if any of it's actually healthy, if you're thinking about it that much, and if you're, it's taking over your whole life or you're restricting yourself from all these things. And so what tends to happen when we become sort of obsessed with that is actually we become obsessed with control. And so our relationship with food becomes about, I'm out of control, I need to control it. If I'm not controlling it, then I lose control, or my body loses, or whatever. And you see this by the way that people talk about food, the way that people talk about, oh, I shouldn't have had that, or I'm gonna work this off tomorrow. They're making those little comments that you're does that matter? You could just eat the food. It's not, it's not a thing. So I think a lot of people don't think about it as a relationship with food because everyone thinks that it's so normalized to try to control it. And that is the relationship that you're setting up. And the thing that we see is that when you have that kind of dynamic with food, or with your body, or both, you tend to actually that ends up being a mirror for other things in your life. And so what I find is that when I help clients heal their relationship with food, it also ripple effects into the rest of their life.
Whitney's whole point with intuitive eating is that you have to give up control when it comes to your relationship with food. Because when you think about people that have really kind of taken on the diet culture and have been entrenched in that for years, decades, whatever it is, you are constantly controlling and thinking about the food that you're putting into your body. You're thinking about exactly what time you're gonna eat every day, what you're gonna eat down to the grams of something that you're putting in your lunch to take to work. You're maybe even fearing going out to eat with friends because you don't know what's gonna be on the menu, things like that. And with intuitive eating, you have to completely give up that control, which is, when you think about it, a very healthy thing for that relationship with food, because control causes anxiety, stress, and ironically, weight gain.
And so with food, it's the same thing. If you are trying to control food all the time, you're not actually trusting yourself, trusting your body, trusting the food. And your body also can't trust you either, because you've probably been on diets, you've probably restricted, fasted, whatever, intermittent fasting, skipping meals, right? We're your body can't trust, like all your body wants is to be fed. Like that's it, you know? And so you really have to let go of control, and that's the scariest part at the beginning. And yet it's so powerful, because when you actually surrender to that, then you develop this like really deep trust with yourself and with food and just with your body, that it will feed you. And then you can start to like work from there.
In Whitney's work and in her experience with her clients, the act of actually giving up control with food can be very terrifying for people, and comes from really deep-rooted psychological foundations.
Your parents can communicate something like, oh, you know, you need to eat less, or you need to, you know, lose a little bit of weight or whatever. And in your kid brain, you're like, my parents won't love me if I don't. And as sort of big as that sounds, although I've definitely worked with people where it's like, that's pretty real. But for most people, that tends to just be a sort of childlike belief. They still hold on to it for decades. You know, you don't even realize that you're holding on to that belief until you start to let go of control. And then all that anxiety and the fear comes up of like, what's going to happen to my body? And then if my body changes, everyone's going to leave me. That's basically what it comes down to. So we have to work on really going back there. Like, where did that story develop? And if people do leave you because your body changes, like, bye, you know? And so how can you be comfortable with that? How can you get to a place where your happiness matters more than what other people are gonna think?
So in order to kind of illustrate the stakes of being a part of diet culture and really restricting the foods that you eat constantly and restricting the amount of calories you have on a daily basis, Whitney talked about this crazy story, honestly, called the Minnesota starvation experiment.
They were looking at, how do we refeed soldiers when they come back? Because they may have been starved, they may have not been eating, so we need to make sure that we're not gonna kill them by refeeding them, because that can happen. And what they did was they put these, you know, I think they were conscientious objectors, so people who wanted to do this instead of being drafted, were put in a study in Minnesota, and they were essentially starved. But what's ironic about the starving was that it's like an 1,800 calorie a day diet. So their starving was like what a lot of people consider a high calorie, which is ridiculous. Okay. So they were put on these 1,800 calorie diets for I think 6 months. I haven't read it in a while, but then they were tracked and monitored, and basically they became irritable. Some of the guys would like sit there and flip through cookbooks every day and became so obsessed with looking at cookbooks that a couple of them actually became chefs after the thing was over. Like, they had no interest in cooking prior, and they became so obsessed with food that like that's what they did. Some of them dropped out of the study because they escaped. Basically, they left and binged on ice cream. And one of the guys was found in an ice cream shop drinking like milk, like tons of milkshakes. Some of them would chew like 40 pieces of gum in a day. They were tired. They were angry with each other. They were so just fatigued. Their muscles were decreasing. Like, it was really intense. And then during the refeeding phase, they binged for like 6 to 9 months afterwards, because they were so undernourished that they needed to replenish their bodies. And this is not like they're out of control, like it's a willpower issue. No, this is physiology. So when we look at things like that, and then we look at, you know, the evidence from these different weight loss studies recently, right? What we see is the body goes out of its way to make sure that you're gonna get renourished and refed. And that's just what it is. Sometimes it's in binging. Sometimes it's just like stubborn weight. You know, you always see those like, how do you get rid of stubborn weight? No, it's not stubborn. Your body's just like trying to survive. So yeah, that's what it is.
So keeping all this in mind, obviously everybody needs certain amounts of vitamins, nutrients, things to keep your body going and continue to, you know, make you strong. And Whitney's whole point is that this can be a lot more straightforward than people think it is, because oftentimes people believe that in order to get those nutrients, they need to also focus on weight loss. And Whitney doesn't agree. She says instead, focus on the nutrients, focus on getting the good stuff into your body, but think of it as weight neutral nutrition.
Yeah, so it's kind of like I was explaining before with intuitive eating. When you remove the pursuit of weight loss, we can shift into this place of actually trusting our bodies. When it comes down to it, because everyone says like, well, why can't you pursue weight loss and eat intuitively? And it's like, well, those two things like fundamentally cannot go together, because even if you're aligned, right, you have your intuitive eating or whatever is in line with what you would do for weight loss, at a certain point, they're going to diverge. You're going to have to make a choice. Do I go with what my body wants right now, or do I cut calories, stay in a calorie deficit, try to lose weight? Does that mean that people who do intuitive eating don't lose weight? No, there's a lot of people who heal their relationship with food and then lose weight kind of unintentionally because their relationship with food when they were dieting was so volatile that they were holding on to a lot of weight, or they were holding on to a lot of stress, or they were overeating frequently. You can eat for the prevention of certain diseases if you're worried about, or the management of a disease if you have one, without focusing on weight loss. So weight neutral nutrition says focus on nutrition, period, end of sentence. Like focus on health, period, end of sentence. Stop making it about weight, because a lot of the things that you're going to do to lose weight are not going to actually be healthy for you.
In our society, we truly talk and think about food all the time. And it's not just about, you know, the joy and the fulfillment that you can get from food and that food can be in your life. It's small things like, oh, I shouldn't have eaten that, or I'll work this off at the gym later, or my diet starts tomorrow, or, you know, I'm doing Whole30 in January, can't wait. Those kinds of things that really build up into everybody's mindset, and it has become so normalized. And Whitney begs the question of, what would life be like if we just stopped pursuing weight loss in that way? And what would our conversations look like, and how freeing of a concept that would be?
If you're at all kind of wondering, oh, can eating be easier than it is right now? Or can it occupy less brain space? I don't even think a lot of people realize how much brain space food is taking up in their lives, and how much time they spend thinking about food in their bodies, that you could be spending thinking about like literally anything else. And that's a really hard part of this whole process, right? Is dieting and controlling food becomes your identity. And then when you stop doing that, you have like an existential gap in your life, and you're like, what's my purpose? You know, like, what am I supposed to be doing here? And it's really scary, but it's also like really exciting and fun, and, you know, an opportunity to explore new things. And so, you know, something that I always say is like, take inventory of how much time and energy you're spending thinking about food in your body. Is that really how you want to be spending your time? Are you just like chronically hungry because you're not eating enough? And are you wondering if food can be easier? Because if you're wondering that, then yes, it can be.
Also bear in mind that not everybody's circumstances are the same. And Whitney fully understands and believes that, and also thinks that medical advice when it comes to weight loss is often oversimplified.
One of the things that we do see is the role of socioeconomic status in health outcomes, just in general. That is like the strongest link between all of the poor health outcomes, basically. Socioeconomic status and marginalization, okay? Being under chronic stress is like really, really, really bad for your health. You might eat more processed foods because they're cheap, and you don't have time or the resources or childcare or whatever to go eat other things. And so you're like dependent on these processed foods, right? Everything's processed, but like these processed foods, we all know what everyone means by that. And you might rely on these because like that's what you have access to, because we have huge like wage inequalities in this country. So it's just so much more complicated than like there's sugar in all the food and like it's giving everyone diabetes. Like that's just not, or like you're addicted to sugar. No, you're probably under chronic stress, or you're probably have some level of like food insecurity. And then what has happened is that rich white male doctors have come in and been like, well, you know, it's the chips and it's the like, and we need to like, this is why everyone in the country is like super unhealthy. And you're like, no, you're right. It has nothing to do with socioeconomic status, has nothing to do with like poverty. No, yeah, but keep selling us like sugar detoxes.
Whitney also defines herself as part of the anti-diet movement.
Diet culture realizes that the anti-diet movement's gaining in popularity, and it's like, oh no, we need to keep up with the marketing of it. So it's really morphed into this sort of it's not a diet, and that I think is probably the most harmful, because people really are like, oh, it's not a diet, but then I end up seeing those clients and it messes them up even more because they were convinced it wasn't a diet, even though everything they were doing was a diet, you know? So yeah, I mean, anything that like with the intention of weight loss.
And still, after this entire conversation with Whitney, I still really wanted to know why it is so incredibly scary for so many of us to actually address our relationship with food and really be honest with ourselves about it.
It can be so limiting in your life to believe that you need other people to tell you how to do certain things, whether it's how to think about things, how to eat, how to, you know, be healthy, how to do this, how to do that. And what I've found is that people just have so many voices in their head, so many things they've read, so much information, that they can't even hear themselves anymore. They're like, well, I don't know how to start healing my relationship with food because I don't even know what to do. That's why I've been looking to everyone else. And it's like, well, you've never given yourself a chance to figure out if you know what to do or not. You know, so sometimes you have to like be in this really uncomfortable state of not knowing in order to be able to hear yourself better.
Yeah.
And the lessons you learn from that are so freeing, because it really does, you know, extend into everything. Like you do have a choice whether or not you know, berate yourself all day. Like you do have a no one is being hurt by that except for you. Right. So what do you know, it's like, it will be uncomfortable at first. That's just is what it is. Like I can't sugarcoat it. It's gonna be uncomfortable. And then you're gonna be so much more grounded in yourself and so much more trusting of yourself, and that lasts a lifetime.
At the end of my conversation with Whitney, I was truly blown away by how well she was able to hit on this give and take relationship with food and the fear that is so deeply intertwined with that. And over the course of our talk, I really appreciated the fact that I was finally hearing from someone whose advice and whose focus on nutrition and health had absolutely nothing to do with losing weight and had everything to do with listening to your body and actually putting your body and your brain in control rather than other people's perception of what your body should look like. Keep in mind, your relationship with food is an incredibly personal thing, and everybody has something different that works best for them. So keep doing your own research, find what works for you in order to maintain that balance in your life. And if you feel like you're struggling with an eating disorder now, we've put some resources in the description. Thank you guys so much for watching. And of course, like, subscribe, let us know what you think in the comments. Let us know what you want us to investigate next in the comments. We're thinking maybe houseplants. And we'll talk to you guys soon.